Hey, friends, it's Dr. Michelle Bengtson. I'm back with you with another episode of your Hope-Filled Perspective. I love a good party. I love to celebrate. I love to have fun. I love to reminisce with friends. And this episode is our third anniversary of being on the air with your Hope-Filled Perspective. So I'm excited to take a little bit of a twist on this week's episode and share with you clips from our top 6 episodes from the past year. I love hearing from you, so I hope you'll let me know what episodes you enjoyed, what guests you might like to hear from, and what topics you'd be interested in hearing me cover and provide a biblically based hope-filled perspective. This first clip that we're going to play for you is from the episode with Reese on how to train your brain to trust God. I'm excited for you to listen to this clip because in this clip, you'll hear a bit about Chris's story and how she got to the point where she realized she needed to make a change and learn how to trust God. Watch her with me, will you? When it comes to talking about how to train our brain to trust God, that has been my life's work. So I'm thrilled to have a partner to really talk about that and help our listeners in any area that they might be struggling. You know, Chris, so often our passions come from our own hurts and trials. Where did your passion for ministry come from?
My passion for ministry came from wanting to see others set free the same way I was set free. For so long, I lived a shallow, empty life. Now, I wasn't happy in that life. I was searching and searching and searching. And Michelle, the minute Jesus came along, it just changed everything. Now, I know some people will give testimony that, over time, Jesus transformed. And of course, he has done that for me. But for me, it was within days that there was these miraculous changes, from job change to I had a trash mouth like you wouldn't believe. That was just gone in a heartbeat. Old habits just completely obliterated. And I was so grateful. And I just wanted to be able to share that with others. And I had spent probably about 25 years in the fitness industry. My heart was always to help people, but I recognized that I was helping them from the outside. And really what I wanted to do was to help them from the inside. When I would work with a personal training client, I cared more about saving their soul than I did what their belly and their butt looked like. So that's how I knew it was time to get out, and God was calling me into ministry.
So since there was such a major transformation so quickly, does that mean you didn't struggle after that?
I'm sorry. I can slow down the chuckle a little bit. No, actually, it seemed like my life was one attack after another and a barrage of struggles. But one thing that I think, and this was just for me, that God probably needed to do is he proved himself very early because of all those struggles I was about to go through. I just knew that I knew that I knew that there was nowhere else that I could go.
Well,
And even during the toughest times, I remember saying to him, God, this is horrible. Why are you allowing this? I want to run away, but where else am I going to go? You have the words of eternal life. So trouble-free? Absolutely not.
But the reason I asked that is because it was such a major transformation relatively quickly. And I want my listeners to know that this is a journey. This is a process for all of us. The Bible talks about us moving from glory to glory. It is a process. The Bible also talks about us working out our salvation. So I just wanted to make sure that our listeners didn't think, oh, well, that happened so quick. What's wrong with me? Because I've been struggling ever since. So I'm glad that you shared that part.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we go from glory to glory, faith to faith, and God brings us through this transforming process. And I've been through so many struggles and so many transformations that I actually joke about it. I'm like, every time I go through a transformation, I kind of just change my hair color to go along with the new me. So
And your hair color is different since
it
the
is
last time
different.
you were on the program.
We came full circle. This is back to my natural color. So we'll see where we go from here.
I like it. I like it. I have found that very few of my clients, friends, or even family members really understand what it means when we say renew your mind or take your thoughts captive. We've heard those expressions, we've read them in the Bible, but so few people really understand what that means. So, can you unpack that a little bit and help our listeners know what that means?
I'd love to. So when it comes to renewing our minds, Romans 12:2 breaks it down for us so simply, and we tend to get it backwards. So we want to be transformed. And isn't that always like us? We kind of put the cart before the horse.
Yep.
So we want to be transformed. So we sign up for transformation seminars, we read books on transformation, when in reality, God is saying, I will do the transforming by the renewing of your mind. So does that mean that God is going to just take over our thoughts and renew everything? That is the way some people will interpret that scripture. But that's not how God works. He does not override our free will, and he's not going to come in and just clean house for us. We have to be active participants in his plan. So he gives us the tools that we need to begin to renew our minds. And here's where I believe that it actually begins. It begins in 2 Corinthians 10:5. Begins with taking every thought captive.
We all need to know how to train our brains to trust God better. So I hope that you'll tune in to Chris's full episode, How to Train Your Brain to Trust God, and see if there aren't some nuggets of wisdom in there that will help you grow in your ability to trust God. This next clip is from an episode that I recorded with my husband about how to help a depressed loved one. When I wrote the book, Hope Prevails, Insights from a Doctor's Personal Journey Through Depression, I had to cut the last chapter of the book. The book was getting too long and the word count was too lengthy. So we had to make a decision with the publisher to cut that chapter. But it's so important that even if we aren't the ones going through depression, that we understand how to help someone who is struggling with depression. In fact, at the end of the book, Hope Prevails, we put a link in there so that people who bought the book could access that missing chapter. But today's clip will give you just a flavor of the conversation that I had with my husband. He's never been clinically depressed. And so imagine being married to a wife who struggled with depression. He didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to him. He didn't know what to do or what not to do. So we had a good chat that will hopefully help you help those who are struggling with depression.
Why don't you tell us just about depression? What is it?
Depression is a medical condition.
Mhm.
It is not just something made up in someone's head. It is a medical condition where people experience, it's considered a mood disorder.
Okay.
As such, it has to be treated like any other medical condition. It is as worthy and justifiable as heart disease, diabetes, or cancer. And so we have to consider it with as much viability as any other medical condition.
Well, but you're talking about three of the biggies there: heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Where does depression fall in with that in terms of prevalence?
Oh, let me tell you, by 2020, depression will be our greatest epidemic worldwide. It will be more prevalent than diabetes, cancer, and heart disease put together.
Oh my goodness.
So we cannot ignore it. In the United States, 1 in 4 will struggle with depression at some time in their lifetime. And what's important to keep in mind is all those major medical conditions that we just talked about, When people struggle with those, they often then struggle with depression as a secondary condition.
Comes along in the package.
It does. And it's not something that we can just say, get over it.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to struggle with depression. And so if they could just get over it, believe me,
It's like
they would.
saying, I'm sorry, you have cancer, just get over it.
If they could, they would.
Sure.
And nobody wants cancer. Nobody wants heart disease, and nobody wants depression.
But isn't depression the same as having the blues?
It is not the same as having the deep blues, but sometimes it starts off as the blues.
Mm-hmm.
The blues are really, we all have those slumps in our days, in our weeks,
Mm-hmm.
where we're just having a down day.
Mm-hmm.
So depression can start off as the blues, but when you experience the blues for more than about 2 weeks at a time, then we might be looking at a true clinical case of depression. Everybody experiences depression a little bit differently, but there are some common signs and symptoms. There's almost always a change in mood, and not everybody feels down and depressed, so to speak. Some experience depression in terms of anger. That was one of the ways that I expressed my depression a lot of the times, was through anger. Some experience it in terms of irritability, agitation. Some cry all the time. Some never cry. And that's why they think, oh, well, I don't have depression because I don't cry. But that would be a myth, because not everybody with depression cries.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost always a change in socialization. A lot of people who experience depression no longer feel like doing the things that they always enjoyed doing before. They don't have the same motivation that they did. There's frequently a change in energy level.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times those things that we just do normally in our day-to-day, if you're depressed, those things are so much harder. I remember when I was going through depression, I would look at my vitamins and I would look at my toothbrush in the bathroom and think, that's just too much effort. I'll do that tomorrow. And I think about that now and I think, how much effort does it take to brush your teeth? Like almost nil.
Mm-hmm.
Or to take your vitamins. But when I was depressed, I just thought, I just don't have the energy for that today. And I remember thinking, taking a shower, oh my word, you might have told me that I had to climb Mount Everest, because it wasn't just taking a shower. It was getting undressed. It was turning on the water. It was shampooing my hair, washing, toweling off, then finding additional clothes to wear. And then I had to blow dry my hair. It was too much. It was too much. And so people with depression experience those day-to-day normal activities. It just requires too much effort, too much energy. And people with depression often experience a change in sleep and a change in appetite. And for some, they sleep too much and eat too much, and others will sleep too little or eat too little.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, depending on how severe my depression was, my experience with those would be different.
Uh-huh.
So what I want people to hear is that everybody's experience with depression is different, just like people's experience with allergies can be different. Some people will present with a doctor and they'll have itchy eyes and a runny nose, and other people will be stuffed up and they'll just experience difficulty with energy level. All those symptoms are equally valid. And so just because your experience is different than mine makes it no less valid. If you are someone who struggles with depression, or you have a friend or loved one who does, I hope that you will go back and listen to that entire episode where Scott and I really tried to talk about what is depression, what are some of the common myths, and what can we do to help someone in the valley. But I also hope that you'll consider picking up my book, Hope Prevails: Insights from a Doctor's Personal Journey Through Depression, as well as the companion book, The Hope Prevails Bible Study. Those two books will give you a good, solid foundation for making it through the valley of depression. Now, the next episode that was so popular was my episode with Erica Wiggenhorn. where we really talked about the fear of inadequacy and the imposter syndrome. And many people don't even realize that that's something that they struggle with. But I know, looking back early on my career, I definitely struggled with the fear of inadequacy and the imposter syndrome. I always felt like I had to look over my shoulder because I was afraid that someone was going to realize maybe I didn't know as much as I should have known. In this clip, Erica shares part of her story about really struggling with her own fear of inadequacy and the imposter syndrome, what it is, and how she got through it. I think it's going to bless you.
I think one of the reasons why women may struggle with it more than men is a couple reasons. Now, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think men, by and large, a lot of their self-worth comes from their job. So it becomes anchored in a particular thing that they can pour a lot of their time and energy into and focus on until they achieve the level of success that they're really after. Mm-hmm. But I think for women, we are much more diversified in how success is measured. So it might be our career, but it's also the way our home looks. It's also the size of clothing we wear. It's also how successful our children are. It's how present and active we are in our faith communities. So we have these barometers, we have multiple barometers of success. And to the point that it becomes impossible to be highly achieving in all of them. So there's always somewhere where we feel like we're falling short. And everything that we do nowadays as women is out there for the world to see. So instead of just judging ourselves or maybe being hard on ourselves, we are now subjugated to the evaluation and the criticism and the measuring of everybody through our social media accounts and our kids' social media accounts. And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And in this day and age where you get just the highlight reel of everybody's lives, it can really set up a bad dynamic where we're comparing our backstory with everybody's highlight.
Yeah.
Now, some of my listeners might be surprised to hear that many of us authors struggle with the imposter syndrome. What exactly is that? And what does it look like and feel like in our lives?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome is just this idea that you feel like a fraud. You feel like a fake. And if people knew the real you assume that they would reject you because all you're allowed to show of yourself in order to be accepted and rejected is the highlight reel. Nobody can really know the backstory. There's also this sense of, any success that you have experienced, anything that has happened to go well or looks like a success was merely a fluke. And it's probably not going to happen again. Next time, what's around the next corner for you is failure or exposure. And once you're exposed, you will definitely be rejected. So you live in this constant fear of waiting to be rejected, waiting to fail, waiting for somebody to point out to you and to others where you're not good enough. And so how we generally react to that is we strive and strive and strive to present and have these perfect lives and these perfect children and perfect marriages. And we work really, really hard to keep that front out there because we fear that rejection. But inwardly, we're isolating because we don't trust other people and we have a hard time being real with other people and we have a hard time letting other people in. And so it can be a very lonely existence and an existence riddled with a lot of anxiety.
Friends, Erica had so much wisdom to share about the topic of fear of inadequacy and the imposter syndrome that you will just have to trust me when I say it would behoove you to go back and listen to her episode if you missed it when it first aired. I want to take a quick break to tell you about something exciting happening in my world. May 2022, my next book releases. I want to tell you a little bit about where that book came from. Many years ago, about a decade ago, I was really struggling. I was physically ill and in the pit of depression, and I needed a reason to go on. I needed a reason to believe that life was still worth living and that we could have a good day despite our circumstances. Well, fast forward, my new book coming out is Today is Going to Be a Good Day. 90 promises from God to start your day off right. I hope that you will be encouraged by this book. It's a beautiful, giftable book. Great for Mother's Day, Father's Day, graduations, birthdays, someone newly diagnosed, someone going through grief or widowhood, divorce, even a birthday or just Christmas. It's one of those books that you'll be able to turn to each morning for just a short bit of encouragement to start your day off right and help you determine to have a good day. Now, friends, this is our anniversary episode, and I'm having fun sharing with you some of the top episodes from the past year. I want to thank you for being a loyal listener, tuning in each week for a biblically based, hope-filled perspective. This next clip is on shame and discouragement, which I think are probably cousins to fear of inadequacy and the imposter syndrome. And what I know is that if the enemy can't defeat us, he will keep us busy by distracting us. He will tempt us, and then he will come back and shame us for when we fall in prey to his temptation. I so loved my conversation with Tina Yeager, where Tina shared part of her story of really having to overcome shame, discouragement, and an eating disorder. Listen in as Tina shares a bit of her story with you.
I've always felt that my deepest places of pain were where God met me and walked beside me. And I felt that He was calling me to be part of that process of Him walking beside others who are experiencing loneliness, isolation, discouragement, shame, and low self esteem, and feeling alone in that process. Because most of the time, the enemy wants to make us feel isolated and alone in our struggles and our suffering, when in truth, we're not the only ones suffering in that way. And we're also not meant to be alone, because God can be right there with us, walking beside us, holding our hand by Himself, just directly, or with other people through the hands and feet of Christ in the body. And I've always wanted to be part of that healing process that He has so graciously imparted to me.
And you do that both through counseling and through coaching and through writing and speaking. I'm wondering if you would share a little bit of your story of low self-esteem and discouragement, and maybe even about the eating disorder that you struggled with, so that my listeners know you really do know.
I don't want anybody to think that I am such an expert that I'm above anybody else. We all struggle. In fact, there are times the enemy still attacks me. Well, a lot of times the enemy still attacks me with discouragement messages and shame messages and things like that, because he attacks us in our area of purpose and in the areas where God has healed us, so that God is prevented, supposedly, which He's not going to be, because He always breaks through, from using us in the way that He intended to. So as a child, I always felt different from, isolated from, had a difficulty connecting with other peers. I always felt like I was on the outside looking in, like that poor girl with her face pressed against the Tiffany's window, wishing I could get in there where all the beautiful, wonderful people were and where they belonged, and to be part of that. And I always felt as though if I could just shrink away and waste away and take up space, make people meet their presence. If they didn't love me and embrace me, then at least they would allow me to be around. So I starved myself trying to be acceptable at some level, even though I still felt there was no way I would ever truly be a lovable, likable person. I felt so badly about who I was that I could never be fully loved by those around me, except maybe my parents because they had to. So I really struggled with that. And it took me until Jesus told me that through the years and through his work with me, walking beside me, that it was he who made me lovable. It was his spirit, his presence, and the fact that he created me that gave me worth, not anything that I could be on my own or do on my own. And I struggled with that for so long. This eating disordered issue was something that started in middle school, continued all the way until I was pregnant with my first child. And that was really what ended the active part of the eating disorder, because I became more focused on my child's health than on being thin, and wishing I could be at some level acceptable by being thin. And that is not always the case. Some women can't even get past their eating disorder when they're pregnant, which is another, level of struggling with that. So I understand that that is not always a cure all for everyone. But for me, that was a turning point. And the Lord worked with me, and I went through many years struggling through this on my own. And then when I became a counselor, I realized almost every woman that came into my office, and many of the men that came into my office, also struggled with this discouragement and shame and low self esteem. And I realized I needed to get past the reach of my office and bring that message of truth about your identity in Christ and your worth in Christ to more people than just those I could see one on one.
Didn't you just love how vulnerably Tina shared from her own personal experience to let you know she really does know? Tina, in her episode on shame and discouragement and how to overcome them, really gave some good practical tools for how to overcome shame and discouragement. So I hope you'll take the time to go back and listen to that full episode. Over the past couple of years, many people have written to me and have shared concerns, lamenting how stuck they feel, despite their desire to move on to bigger and better things. In the episode that I recorded with Amy Jupe, she shared how she and her husband faced similar circumstances during the COVID pandemic. They had to do a lot of soul searching while learning how to get unstuck and move forward in life. We all get to those plateaus in life, don't we? Where we're not sure what to do next. We know that there's something bigger and better waiting for us out there, but we're not sure how to get unstuck and move toward that goal. Listen in as Amy shares a bit of her story about getting unstuck and moving forward. How did you and your husband manage the pandemic and reinvent yourselves after both of your work industries shut down? You mentioned, you weren't able to go to the trade shows. And so how did you manage that?
Yeah. So what we did, like from a financial perspective, my husband used to do construction. And so he decided, because he had just actually remodeled the basement that I'm sitting in now, right before the pandemic. It was perfect because we had an extra space as we were all trying to spread out in the house. And so he went back to that. He did construction. And then because our industries kind of shut down, we just had, our hearts were breaking for our friends. They didn't have work. So with production, that being closed, he used a lot of those guys because they would build sets and build stages and do things, had them come on, and he started hiring them for construction projects. So he was doing that. And then eventually he started getting more production online, and he had a shift. It was like, okay, there's no live events, but there's online, there's virtual events. So now it's like learning a new thing. So it's like we had to be willing to change and adapt and have new people come alongside of us that are good with graphics and IT and know how to do like live streams and even get the equipment for that. So it was like a little step of faith. And we did have to get the SBA loan. So that was a part of the process for us as well. For me, we were in the CAM group together. We were in a Christian author mastermind group. It really helped to have other women around me that were doing the same thing. And I was newer to this, but just to have that kind of energy and that collaboration, and just feel that support and that push, even from our coach. She was like, let's have something to show for this pandemic. So it really pushed me to focus on the prayer journal. And I said, okay, God, if everything's going away, I'm going to at least do something to show to show for this year. So that became, sometimes when you have a goal and you're working on something, it gives you hope, right? That
Yeah.
you're not just looking at all the problems and everything, that's happening. But it's been a year of change. And that's actually my word for 2021 is I'm almost 50. I'm going to be 50 at the end of the year. And it's like, okay, you often think I can't do this. I'm not good at this. And I keep hearing him say, change, change, Amy, and just believing that I can change. He'll help me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So yeah,
So being willing to change and adapt is part of what we need if we want to get unstuck.
Yes, I agree.
It's a willingness, wouldn't you say? Because
Yeah.
we're not going to get unstuck as long as we're digging our heels in and wanting to continue to do things the same way that got us where we are so far.
Yes, I agree. It's kind of like the paralytic, when he's at the pool. I don't know if you ever watched The Chosen, but I watched that with my husband, and it's a really amazing TV series about, Jesus. But there's an episode in there even about the paralytic, and he's on the mat and he can't get to the pool, and if you read it in the New Testament, and then Jesus said, do you want to be made well? And so I think that's often the question. We might think, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. And we think of all the reasons why we can't. And then Jesus is like, do you want to be made well? Do you want to get unstuck? Do you want to move forward? And so that you really realize a lot of it relies on you. Are you willing to take that step of faith and get up or move in that direction or take that next right step he's showing you?
And really, to get unstuck, we've got to be willing to take the step in faith beyond our fear. That story of the paralytic is one of my favorite ones because really, Jesus already knew the answer. So he never asked questions because he didn't know the answer. But what he was really saying to that paralytic is, are you willing to do what it takes? And are you willing to surrender your current identity? Because once I heal you, you're not going to be the paralytic anymore. You're going to have to get a job. Things are going to change. And I think that's where we have to get to when we feel stuck in life. We have to get to the point where we're willing to say, I'm going to step out beyond my fear.
Yes.
To see what else God has for me. Yeah. I so appreciate Amy's wisdom that the keys to getting unstuck start with listening to God, serving others, and being willing to change. Amy offers several other keys to getting unstuck in the rest of her episode, so I hope that you'll take the time to go back and listen to the episode with Amy Jube about getting unstuck. Now, the last episode that gathered so much interest was the episode that I did with my friend Marsha Ramslin about getting organized and staying organized. Now, you might wonder, how does that fit in with these other episodes that we've been highlighting on this anniversary reel? Well, it does, because each of the episodes that we've been talking about today really come back to our mindset. And I love how simple Marsha breaks things down into simple, doable tasks that when they become part of our second nature, part of our habits, if you will, help get us organized and stay organized. Listen in on this clip with Marsha Ramslin.
I remember the day exactly. I was in my kitchen and my husband was going to show up in 10 minutes from work, and my 6-year-old was slowly emptying the dishwasher to help me. And I was just driving nuts. And then the 4-year-old daughter was coloring off the countertop onto white countertops. I'm like, no, another mess. And my 6-month-old son was crawling at my feet. And I thought, when will he sleep through the night? And I looked around at laundry piles and mail piles and dishes, and I stirred the spaghetti noodles faster, as if that was really going to help. And all of a sudden, out of my mouth exploded, someone's got to get organized. And my 3 little kids froze and looked at me, and I said, by the ages of everyone in this room, I guess that would be me. And so at that point, I thought, just like you do in a crisis, it's like, I have got to change. I am not going to keep living this way. my life is worth more than this. Not worth more than the kids, but worth more than feeling frustrated. So I started to read everything written on Organize back in like 1985, and it was written by left-brained men who said, all you have to do is make a list, start with the top item, and check it off. Just stay with the list. And as I started organizing myself, I thought, oh, we women, we can't even find the list in an hour, let alone keep on track, because our lives are so complicated. And I find that men also have complicated lives now. So as I got systems, I started to get so excited about it. You know, Michelle, it used to take me from 6 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock at night to finish the dishes. I mean, 4 hours to do dishes. But then I thought, well, if I do this, it's going to go faster. If I gather everything on one side of the sink, if I do this, I got it down to a half an hour. And now I'm down to about 8 minutes. So you can keep improving. I was so excited. Then I thought, oh, what's next? Okay, my laundry system. Oh yeah, we don't have to do laundry every day. Pick days of the week. I got that done, the kitchen, the laundry, and then the cleanup and the clutter, then the paper. And I was so excited. I ended up teaching at a VBS class, which is Vacation Bible School for the moms. And for 5 days, I thought, oh, this is great. I'll do Proverbs 31 in her time management. And then as the first night, I'm like, there's not 5 hours of time management in here. I have to give more tips. And so as I gave tips, they went, oh, that's great. And then the next day, more tips. And it just continued. And people said, well, could you come to my house and organize? Okay. And could you go to my husband's work and organize? And it just exploded. So I was doing 50% speaking and 50% clients. And I have done this from New York to when we moved to Dallas, when we moved to California, all over the place. And I am thankful that not only have I learned the systems, but I have found that people are really smart. And once they learn the systems, they take off. And it's just really a great skill that we're not born with. And people say to me, aren't you worried that you understand us? And I said, I do understand, but I have the gift of strategy and focus, and I can give it to you. And so that way, even though they may not be born with it, I can teach it.
As you can tell, Marcia has lived what she teaches. She has so many tips to offer that I know that you will be immensely blessed by listening to the full episode on how to get organized and stay organized. Today, friends, I want to celebrate you and celebrate the 3rd anniversary of your hope-filled perspective being on the air. Without you listening as faithful listeners, this program wouldn't even have a reason to exist. I'd love to hear from you, love to know what it is that you enjoy, the guests that you've loved, the topics you'd like us to cover. I find it interesting that the top 6 episodes of the past year really in some way come down to knowing who we are and paying attention to our mindset, whether it's with Reese on learning how to train your brain to trust God, or whether it's knowing how to help a depressed loved one. We also discovered what we need to know about how to overcome the fear of inadequacy and imposter syndrome, how to overcome shame and discouragement, how to get unstuck and move forward, to how to keep our life and our mind decluttered by getting organized and staying organized. Isn't it interesting that God tells us how important it is to take every thought captive? And so much of what we've been recapping today talks about exactly that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed putting it together for you. As always, this has been your Hope-Filled Perspective. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Bengtson. I look forward to chatting with you again next week. But until then, may you have a hope-filled week.